On the evening of May 8, 2025, as the sun dipped behind the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, a quiet tension filled the air. Thousands stood in Vatican City, their eyes locked on the chimney above the Sistine Chapel. The world had waited for hours, holding its breath. And then, without a word, without a sound, came the answer. White smoke curled into the sky. The message was clear. A new pope had been chosen. Bells rang out across Rome. Their deep sound echoed over rooftops, a sign of joy, of transition, of something sacred. Moments later, a man stepped onto the balcony above St. Peter's Square, clothed in white, calm, steady. The name that followed surprised many. Robert Francis Prevost, an American, a missionary, a man whose name most of the world had never heard before. But within the church, he was known, deeply respected. Now he would be called Pope Leo XIV. Born on September 14, 1955, in the heart of Chicago, Robert Prevost grew up in a working-class neighborhood. His family was devout, rooted in the Catholic faith, committed to discipline, service, and prayer. Even as a child, Robert was drawn to the mystery of the church. He wasn't loud, he wasn't ambitious. He was curious, quiet, devoted. His calling didn't come in a single moment. It unfolded slowly, like a sacred story, through years of study, reflection, and surrender. He joined the Augustinian order, a religious group focused on community life, teaching, and deep spiritual roots. He studied theology in Rome, but it was not in the marble halls of Italy that his soul was truly formed. It was in Peru, in the dusty towns of northern Peru. Prevost didn't just preach the gospel, he lived it. He listened, he healed, he taught. He spoke fluent Spanish and connected deeply with communities often forgotten by the institutional church. To them, he wasn't just a priest. He was family. He walked among them, served with them, suffered with them. For decades, this would be his life, not in the spotlight, but in the margins. In 2014, he became the Bishop of Chiclayo, a region in Peru scarred by poverty and struggle. His leadership style was not one of power or pomp. He traveled by foot to parishes. He sat with grieving families. He confronted injustice. He did not seek headlines. He sought hearts. People did not follow him because of his title. They followed him because of his love. Then in 2023, Pope Francis brought him back to Rome. There he was appointed as prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops, one of the most influential positions in the Vatican. It was his job to help choose bishops around the world, and his choices reflected his values: shepherds who were close to the people, grounded, honest, spiritually strong, not politicians, not celebrities, but servants. Still, even in this powerful role, Prevost remained in the shadows. He gave few interviews, he avoided the spotlight. But those who worked with him knew. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was discernment. He prayed deeply, he listened deeply, he led from within. So when Pope Francis died, and the Church entered a time of uncertainty, most media outlets didn't expect Prevost to become Pope. His name wasn't at the top of the speculation lists, but inside the Sistine Chapel, where the cardinals gathered in prayer, one name began to rise, whispered at first, then with clarity: Prevost. He was seen as someone who could continue the reforms of Pope Francis, but with even greater spiritual depth. He was American, yes, but more importantly, he was global. He had lived among the poor. He had seen faith not as a debate, but as survival, as light in darkness, as love in action. When he emerged on that balcony as Pope Leo XIV, there was silence, awe. The name Leo hadn't been used in centuries. It was not a random choice. The last Pope Leo, Leo XIII, was a reformer, a philosopher, a voice who tried to balance tradition and modernity. He defended workers. He inspired renewal. In choosing the name Leo XIV, Prevost was sending a message that he too would walk this path, faithful to tradition, open to dialogue, and deeply concerned with the human soul. From the first words he spoke, it was clear this would not be a papacy of grand speeches. He did not make bold declarations, he simply bowed. He asked for prayer. The people didn't see a ruler, They saw a shepherd, and so the world began to listen. What kind of pope would he be? He answered that not through interviews, but through action. He chose not to move into the luxurious papal apartments. Instead, he remained at the Casa Santa Marta, a Vatican guest house. A humble space, a quiet room. He brought with him just a few belongings, a worn-out prayer book, a rosary used thousands of times, and handwritten letters from his years in Peru. He kept his early morning routine, rising before dawn, praying in silence, not reading political briefs but reading scripture, trusting not in strategy but in surrender. Those who met him described something unique. He didn't speak loudly, but when he did speak, you listened. His voice was soft, but it carried weight. His eyes were tired but full of attention. In meetings, he asked questions no one expected, not about budgets or headlines, but about people, about forgotten dioceses, about seminaries in war zones, about how the Church could remain close to the wounded, the invisible, the broken. 1. Of his first private meetings as Pope was not with a president or king. It was with disabled pilgrims from Latin America. He didn't stand on a stage. He knelt beside a boy in a wheelchair, placed a hand on his shoulder, smiled, no cameras, no applause, just love. And the world began to see. This Pope was different. Observers started comparing him to Pope Francis. Francis was known for speaking off the cuff, with energy and emotion. Pope Leo XIII, however, was more restrained, more thoughtful. His words were chosen slowly. Sometimes they were poetic, always rooted in scripture. He didn't aim to be trendy, he aimed to be truthful. His first public message was not about politics, not even about church reform. He spoke instead about the gospel of the day, the story. Of the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, they were walking in grief, uncertain about the future, until a stranger walked with them, opened the scriptures, shared a meal, and their hearts burned with faith again. Leo XIV said, this was where the Church is now, in an Emmaus moment, disoriented, divided, weighed down by scandal and fatigue. But the answer, he insisted, was not in programs or slogans. It was in walking with Christ again, in rediscovering prayer, scripture, sacraments, silence, service, not as memories, but as living realities. This message echoed far and wide. Bishops heard it. Lay people heard it. Missionaries, youth, even critics of the Church stopped to listen. Pope Leo XIII wasn't offering slogans. He was offering something deeper, a return to the heart of the Church. But he was no idealist. He knew the world was complex. As prefect of bishops, he had seen how polarization, both inside and outside the Church, was turning theology into ideology, turning faith into fighting. He quietly worked to appoint leaders who rose above those battles, people who could build bridges, not walls. As Pope, he continued that same vision. He said the Church is not a fortress, not a battlefield. She is a home, a place for courage, for conversion, for communion. Within weeks, he began holding private meetings with leaders from regions often forgotten in Church decisions. From Congo to Cambodia, from Alaskan parishes to Syrian refugee camps. He wanted to listen, not just visit, but truly listen. To Pope Leo XIV, the margins were not the edge, they were the center. He often repeated a line from one of his sermons. In Peru, the edge of the Church is the heart of Christ. And even with young people, his focus was not on trends or numbers. He met with a group of Catholic youth and asked, where do you feel seen? Where do you feel lost? How can we walk together? It was a simple question, but one that stayed with them long after the meeting. This is who Pope Leo XIV is, a shepherd, a listener, a servant. And how will he change the Church? He may not change it with loud reforms or dramatic gestures, but he is changing it already, with quiet strength, with deep prayer, with a heart shaped by decades of serving the forgotten. He is reminding the Church of who she is, not a corporation, not a courtroom, but a family, a home, and a witness to the love of Christ. His papacy is just beginning, but his path is clear. He walks not in front of the people, but beside them, and perhaps that's exactly what the Church needs right now. Not a king, not a celebrity, but a shepherd, one who leads not with force, but with faith. Pope Leo XIV has not come to be served, but to serve, and the world is watching, not just with curiosity, but with hope.